consider Zelensky not credible, you're supposed to be making a deal with him, whether you like him or you don't like him. So I wasn't happy with that. But I think he's going to be good. And I certainly wouldn't want to put secondary tariffs on Russia.
President Trump is apparently frustrated with the negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. This weekend, he told our own Kristen Welker that he was angry and, quote, pissed off at Russian President Vladimir Putin. But despite all that tough talk, Trump said that he still trusted Putin to keep his word. Michael McFaul is here to discuss. He's the former U.S. ambassador to Russia and MSNBC international affairs analyst. Ambassador, were you surprised to hear that from Trump? Do you believe him?
I was a little surprised because he very rarely criticizes Vladimir Putin. That goes back a decade. Happens every now and then, but not often. I think he's coming to realize that it's not going to be so easy to just have a peace agreement done in a day, right? Remember, he said that many, many times on the campaign trail. I can do this in a day. Well, it's taken more than that. And number two, I hope he's realizing that his negotiating strategy is not working. His negotiating strategy is to give Putin everything and to put pressure on the Ukrainians, and he thinks that's a way to get a deal. Now, I don't know, maybe that's how it works in business in New York City. You would know better than I, but I know that that doesn't work with Vladimir Putin, and I know it doesn't work in diplomacy generally. When you give concessions, Putin pockets them and asks for more. That's exactly what's been happening, and I think now that's why the president is getting frustrated.
It also doesn't work in business on planet Earth. Now, a Kremlin spokesperson said that they see the effort to end the war in Ukraine as a drawn-out process. And Putin is also planning to draft 160,000 more soldiers. What does that tell you about how committed they are to a peace process?
I've never been convinced that Putin wants a peace agreement until he can no longer march to west on the battlefield. And by the way, that happens generally in wars. They either end, one side wins, or there's a stalemate on the battlefield. Right now, you have neither of those. Putin thinks he's winning. Putin wants to conquer the territories that he's already annexed on paper. If you buy a map in Russia today, 4 of the territories, regions of Ukraine are part of the Russian Federation, but on the ground, he doesn't control them. So I've seen no evidence that he wants to stop until at least he gets there. And the only way you're going to stop him is to stop him with military force. You've got to match that force on the battlefield to create a stalemate, and then that's how you're going to get a real peace deal. Otherwise, you're seeing the evidence that he's going to keep fighting, especially when we are disarming the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are living off the arms that the Biden administration provided. Once those are out, they're going to be in trouble, and that's what Putin is banking on.
All right, give us a history lesson, because this is what I really want to know tonight. When you see Elon Musk and the administration's push to privatize the U.S. government, does it remind you of what happened in Russia in the 90s when oligarchs got more and more power?
It reminds me of it. I even wrote an article called The Privatized State in the late 1990s, and that's exactly what happened. It's not the Putin era. People get confused. You asked for the history lesson. Here it is. When Yeltsin, the president of Russia, first ran, he was a populist, nationalist, wanted to change the status quo, a vibrant guy. But when he ran the second time, you know what? He needed a bunch of money from the oligarchs to win, and then he won. And then he was a little more checked out in that second term, and the oligarchs took over. And they used the state, they privatized the state to make themselves rich. And that, to me, is the parallel. And the story ends even more tragically, because those same oligarchs, they're the ones that chose Putin to be the next president of Russia. Not Boris Yeltsin, he was kind of checked out. Not the Russian people, they kind of ratified it. They thought that Putin was going to be the guy to secure their property rights. And we know what happened after that. It was a complete disaster for Russian democracy, and I would say for Russian capitalism as well.
So when you, knowing what you know, when you look at what's happening here in the last 71 days, what do you think?
I'm nervous about it. I don't like it. We are weakening the democratic institutions. That reminds me of that era. We are allowing really rich people to do things. You know, I don't trust that Elon Musk is doing things in the national interest. I think he's doing things for his own interests, and that's not good for democracy. I hope I'm wrong about that, by the way. I don't know for sure. But that's not the way democracies are supposed to work. And that's exactly what happened that eroded democracy in Russia. And people say now, well, it never could have been a democracy. That is not true. There was a chance for democracy to take hold, and it was the oligarchs taking over in the late 90s and then selecting the wrong guy to take over that they thought would secure their property rights. That was a giant mistake they made. I hope we don't make the same mistake in our country.